Hello, everyone, and welcome to Designing Your Own Backsplash with Wanderlust Ceramics. I'm Anthony Frangiotis of the Drawing Room in downtown New Bedford, and this event is recorded as part of South Coast Spring Arts. I'm joined today with Craig Crawford of Wanderlust Ceramics, as well as Liz Arago. We're going to be going over the process. Hi, ladies.
Hi.
We're going to be discussing Craig's work. She's the founder, owner of Wanderlust Ceramics, and the process by which she makes her own tiles.
Thanks, Anthony.
It's nice to see you, even if it's virtually.
It's true. It is nice to see both of you.
Oh, and I think that's Ginger, Liz's sidekick.
Ginger always likes to make a cameo in our drawing room live stream and recorded events. So I will apologize in advance if you hear any dogs barking, but I'm very excited for today's presentation. We got a preview as we were, walking through a few things yesterday. So I'm very excited to see what Craig has to share with you all.
I'm thrilled that you all invited me to do this and that anybody might be tuning in. That's very exciting to me.
Are you coming to us from your studio today?
I am in East Greenwich. It's my ceramic studio. I've been here for about 8 years, and then I was in North Kingstown before that.
So, and you have a background of having your own tile production company.
I do. I went to school for textiles and worked in the textile industry for about 10 years in New York, and started a ceramic business, and then eventually moved back to Rhode Island to open the business. And it was kind of a big production, employees and everything I really wasn't equipped to do, but did it anyway. And I sold to showrooms, mainly in New York on the East Coast, but some in California, Oregon, and Texas. And we did the field tile, and we also did the decorative tile. So I would have sample boards in the showrooms that they would write the orders from, and I was their wholesaler.
Yeah, and it's interesting to hear about your textile background, because when I look at some of your work, it's some of that translates in terms of pattern. We were looking yesterday at some of your patterns that you've created and different pieces. So it's neat to see you too.
True. It was a natural transition because you're working with showrooms like you would in the textile industry, and architects, designers, and they spec things the same way. So it felt very comfortable to go from one to the other.
So in terms of your current work, I know we have a display here in the drawing room of your made-to-order tiles, which always gets a lot of attention because it's almost like eye candy.
Oh,
well, we have a variety of different glazes that's shown, and then we show a sample of what can be done with your work. So this piece that we're looking at now is part of our display in the drawing room, and illustrates an inset that could be created. This is by Wanderlust and Craig for Backsplash. I'm always showing off the chocolate clay tiles, just because I find them very appealing, and you don't often see a dark bodied clay in a backsplash, but I know that's not what we're talking about.
Looking at dark clay too, it's beautiful. It's just that in the studio, if you're working with white clay and then you introduce dark clay, it can get intermingled and it can be problematic.
In terms of process, Craig, where and when and how do you suggest we all think about this, or when do you think we should start thinking about creating a backsplash?
Well, if somebody's going to do their kitchen or their bathroom, they would probably be working with contractor, architect, designer, and typically when you start that process, you should start thinking about the tile as well, because there is, if you're doing a custom job, there is, time for the production, but also for the preliminary artwork and color samples, and drawings. I like to do a 2-scale drawing of the space. And if there's a drawing and elevation of the space, it makes it very easy to do a layout. What I typically like to do is have the measured space, and then if the customer had a tile shape size in mind, like a subway tile, brick, 3x6 or a 4x4, then I can do an overlay on the space of the drawing, and then the decorative elements can go on top of that. And that way I can do several kind of quick sketch layouts to pick from. And then from there, I like to sample the colors, sample, the glaze and the size of the tile. But all that takes time. It can be up to like 6 to 8 weeks for a custom job from start to finish. I actually like the problem-solving drawing part a lot, because it gives me an idea of what the customer likes, and what their style is, how they feel about their home, the colors of cabinets, walls, flooring. All of that should play into the design of the tile, because obviously it's going to probably be there for a while.
Do you find that people start first with their cabinet and countertop material, or do you recommend starting with tile inspiration in terms of pattern or design? Or
well, it'd be nice to, if somebody were to come to me, they probably have an idea about their color scheme, I would assume. And so it gives a starting point. But also, I would recommend, tearing things out of magazines that they like, any kind of books. One of my favorite magazines is The World of Interiors. I find it just so inspirational. There's so many beautiful colorways in there, and materials and product. And I think there's a picture there of the magazine if anybody is interested. You can get it. It's expensive, but one issue will keep you busy for a while. It's just very fun.
Is it a monthly publication or an annual publication?
It is monthly. It's British, but they have a product section in the back that is actually beautiful products. They highlight art books and artists, and it's just
wow,
great resource.
Mm-hmm.
But so getting back to your question, I think that anybody starting this process would probably have some sort of inkling about which way they want to go, at least for personal style. And that to me is really important. The drawing that Liz has brought up was done for a woman in New York, and this was going to be a large bathroom, and she and her husband were into theater. I think he maybe did musical scores, but she wanted the Commedia dell'arte, which is the theatrical troops that used to be around in the 1600s, which is Punch and Judy came from this tradition, all theater basically. And these are the characters like El Capitan, Punchinello. There's a Harlequin. There's quite a few of them, and they're usually dancing and doing theater. And so she wanted to use these images in a layout on the brick tile. So I did several layouts. This was one we didn't go with, but she did go with one where there were different smaller dancing figures around, and it was fun. We tried to create a lot of movement.
Yeah. And is this a combination of made-to-order tiles and pre-made tiles, or are they all handmade tiles when you're talking about the field and the accent?
Well, anything that I had done in the past, well, most of everything I've done in the past, I would make the field tile as well. So the glaze, it would kind of be a seamless match. But people sometimes want to use commercial tile, which is fine too, especially like if you're doing a mural behind a cook stove. It would be easy enough to use commercial tile for something like that. But I do like to, sometimes I like to bring out colors that I'm using in, say, a mural, and then make smaller decorative items around that would take your eye around to whatever it is you're tiling. I think it makes for a more cohesive look and a little more interest.
In terms of the clay that you use or the glaze that you use, are there any specific types or specific materials that you lean to for a kitchen backsplash or a bath, bath backsplash, wet areas or hot areas, or is it fairly standard?
Yeah, the glazed tiles will pretty much stand up to anything. These are not made for the floor. So that requires a much denser, higher fired body. These are fine for that. I usually use a white clay body because my glazes tend to be a little bit translucent, and I'm silk screening the images onto a flat slab. So I like what my process is I have a slab roller where I roll out a large slab of wet clay, and then I will silk screen the images, whatever, like for instance, the board that you have, that's a silk screen. Actually, I have it right here. It's this is the silk screen of the image that.
Okay, yeah.
But so I would screen that, and it dries fairly quickly. Cut it up into the.
And you screen that onto the wet clay.
I do.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And it sets up fairly quickly, and then after that, I will cut it into whatever size tile I want it to be, and then leave it to dry for about a week, I'd say. And then I fire it once, and then after it comes out of the kiln, I'll add color and glaze and fire it again.
So actually, I just learned something. So the image, for instance, behind a cook stove is one silk screen frame that's put onto the wet clay and then cut.
Right.
Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it can work different ways because the silk screens, I can actually layer images. So on your board, the frame I used different screenings of seaweed, I believe it was, that went around that. So there's a lot of ways you can approach it and add color if you want.
So the silk screen is actually, sorry, I'm really getting thinking too much about it. It changes the surface, or it puts ink on the surface?
It puts ink on the surface.
It puts ink on the surface. Okay.
And
I
usually screen in darker colors, so it will pop, and then add any kind of softer colors later on in the second firing.
Which probably lends itself to the translucent glazes that you were talking about, because if you were to use an opaque glaze, you would lose all of that. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay. Oh, wow. It's fun. So I'll let you continue through the process. Sorry, I didn't mean to ask so many questions.
No, I love that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have the brown clay color tiles there, and that glaze on those tiles is opaque, and it's a higher fire.
Right. I would think that those particular tiles would make a better field tile than anything else.
Right, they would, and I like that solid glaze. The picture, the green picture of the tiles that first came up of a backsplash.
Yes.
Smaller images that I pulled from the main mural and repeated them going around the kitchen. And that, because the glaze, that dark green glaze, is opaque, it was actually 3 different glazes. I had to use screen the image on, and then I used a wax resist to keep the image, the white and the black, so it would show up after the glaze was applied. So
is this a white bodied clay, or is this a chocolate clay?
It's a white bodied clay.
White.
Right. And so I wanted to get a lot of different variation in the field tile. So 3 different glazes. There was like a stormy gray blue, a bright green, and then a mustardy yellow. And so each tile would come out quite different. I wanted to create that deep kind of ocean feel.
And then the small critters that are on the green tiles, the field tiles, those are also silk screened?
They were, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I just thought it would add a little bit more interest. when I had my tile business, we made the tile frames, we made the borders if anybody wanted borders, and we did little inserts that could be cut into the brick tiles, 4x4s, wherever, if somebody wanted some sort of decorative element, throughout the installation.
Yeah. So, and I know you used the word had. You still have a tile business. It's just much smaller than it was.
Right. I am the sole employee. And I do Backsplash.
I didn't want anybody to think that they couldn't get one of these beautiful works of art for their kitchen or bath.
No, I really enjoyed doing the custom, because when I had a tile business, we were working from a catalog. So an order would be placed and we would be making variations of the same thing all the time. But now it's like a one of a kind. So it's more interesting for me.
Right. And you're able to talk through an idea with a customer. So certainly, I know when I work with customers, there's a inkling of an idea or a strong idea, and then sort of talking through how that comes to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
So for the most part, you see it through to what the original vision was, but I'm sure you probably have had experience where that's happened, as well as where things may have changed completely.
Right. And that's
right?
fun too. It's kind of, the process is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy that part of it. I enjoy, listening to people and what it is what's important to them, and the problem solving. I think that's all really fun. And the thing about doing a custom job is the tile can be any shape, any color. It doesn't have to be the standard 4x4, 6x6. We get used to seeing that, and you think that's all you can do. But when you go to install it, any installer has to do a lot of cutting to fit around windows and outlets and things like that. So it doesn't matter what size it is.
Mm-hmm.
Which is,
yeah, I know. We always have conversations in the field when we're laying out tile about where to start, where the grout lines start and end, and outlets are a big discussion point. Right. And the outlets go in far earlier than the tile goes in.
Right.
So when I was asking you earlier about when to start thinking about this, my opinion is it's never too early.
I agree with that. I totally agree.
Especially go ahead.
During the tile production business, I would get requests to make the outlets to match the tile, which we did.
Yeah, I bet.
We made them by hand. At first I thought, wow, I don't know. And then it worked out fine.
Yeah. Well, and that's certainly an option to consider. If I were going to the trouble of having a made to order tile backsplash, the last thing I would want to see is a plastic outlet cover.
Right. No,
the fact that that's an option is great.
Yeah, I really like the fact that these people were into detail like that.
Yeah.
I would have people that had their favorite wines, and they brought me their labels. We did a wine, label kitchen.
Oh, that's neat. So that was silk. So the favorite wine labels were silkscreen. I know a few people who might like that.
Yes, that was fun to do. So I feel like really there is so much that can be done with the process I use. As far as ideas go, I have probably over 200 silk screens here with numerous images on them. And it's fun because you can overlap them. You can make an overall pattern. I can use the textile-y patterns as framework, so there's a lot of different ways to go with it.
Yeah. So can you share some of these things that are in your studio?
Sure. I mean, Liz can we put the pictures up that Liz has?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So that's one of the repeated ink drawings that I've done this past year, and it's in repeat. So in textiles, you have to put everything in repeat because obviously, like on a loom, there's 54 inches wide, and the pattern has to repeat within that framework. And so tiles kind of adhere to that too, if it's a repeating pattern. So in this particular pattern, it was, it's a half drop flip, which was one of those things.
Wait a minute, say that again.
So it's a flipped pattern. So the repeat, if you see
half drop flip.
yes,
Okay.
and it's one thing in textiles that we would do so there wouldn't be a visible repeat line.
Okay.
You try to hide that wherever you can, and some there's different types of repeating patterns. So that's what I was going for with this idea. I haven't yet made a silk screen of it, and if I were to do that, sometimes I like to just do these artworks and live with them for a while before I think I want to silk screen it.
Sure. So this is an ink drawing.
Correct.
And what size is this ink drawing?
Let's see.
Just for scale. I mean, just roughly. It's not a is it a?
There's there's 8 6x6 tiles roughly. So.
So you're drawing them full scale at 6x6.
Well, what this is, so half of that, actually only one square, you can see the repeating dark flower in there. That is the design. Okay. So the other part, I flipped it and then repeated it. So it becomes, that way I can see the entire design, what it would look like, repeat it out, and see where the problems are for repeat lines. So it's not as much work as it sounds, but if I were to silk screen it and color it, I would probably do this in different varying shades of blue and white. It was based on an Indonesian print that I saw that was so beautiful because of the different shades of the blue. It was very lush. So I'll see if I mean, it could be multicolored, but I think it might be too busy.
When you're working in pattern, do you also enlarge or allow for the option of enlarging the scale of the pattern?
Absolutely.
Because this would be very different in a much larger repeat.
Right, absolutely. No, I think scale is extremely important when I'm working with any kind of design. And for these, I was thinking specifically for tiles, which needed to be bigger than I usually make my designs for my dishes or the sconces. They're smaller. So definitely, I like the scale, and it's kind of fun to work larger. I don't usually do it, but I think it's great.
So you mentioned earlier that the tiles that you typically are making are for wall use only and not for floor. What about exterior use? For instance, on a porch or exterior wall, porch or a garden, that's a different clay body. You wouldn't shy away from it, but it's a different clay body, I would think, for exterior.
Yes, I would fire it at a higher temperature, and probably once you. There's clay body, there's temperature, and there's glaze fit. And so you have to be aware of kind of all three at the same time, because you can't, the glaze, if you're using a high fire clay body to be vitrified, which means it's very hard and dense, then you also need to get a high fire glaze to fit it. So it's particular, but yes, I could easily do that, a different clay body and glaze.
Well, yeah, I have all kinds of ideas floating through my head as we're talking.
This was another cook stove backsplash, and this came from an old Italian etching of. There were all these beautiful fruit etchings that were large scale. They're around their public domain, and then the frame to this was a hand carved piece of clay that then I made a mold of, and then it repeated out. And then, the grapes were hand colored after the first firing. And so,
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I made all the brick tile and then the small gray framing around it.
And then, do you have installers that you like to work with in the area? Or is it open?
Usually if there's a contractor or somebody working with you on a renovation, they usually have somebody they like to use. But if not, I could probably recommend somebody. But I'll tell you, the installation is really important. I'll tell you, it can make or break something, I have to say. And it's fun. I like to be there if I'm not doing the installation, just to make make sure, especially if there's an image that's being framed, you know, I do usually a sketch for the installer, not that they always follow it, but just to kind of make sure, because if it's handmade tile, each one is a little different, and they have to, you know, they have to finesse it. Right.
Oh, look at those characters.
So those were also from Jacques Collot from around the 1600s. He was an incredible draftsperson. These were called gobies, which were these little dwarfs, and they're doing all different kinds of fun things. And believe it or not, these were kind of popular as a line.
I believe it.
Then the top pieces were borders that one was screened and the other one was a carved border that we made just as accents. Right. So these were from the line that we had, and they're based on mythology, some of them of the designs, or the Commedia dell'arte figures, you know, the theatrical pieces. And then we had the bright green trim to separate the top and the bottom, and then framed out the pieces in kind of neutral tones. This is a kitchen of a backsplash that I did. It was on this farm in North Carolina, and this couple that owned the house, they wanted something very personal to them. So the large platter shape behind the stove is actually kind of a hand-drawn picture. They have horses and they have 2 dogs that they love. They go everywhere with them, and they wanted everything in that picture. And so from that, then I added to the right, there's a platter shape with one of my designs and a horse. So they wanted horses in there, and then we drew their little bulldog and another dog, and they are on other plates, as well as a rabbit and some flowers and just things that were reminiscent of where they live in North Carolina. And this was I worked with the designer in that, and then the tiles were painted white, and they sent me a cabinet swatch color to match. And then everything else was just different variations of blue.
Well, and it looks like it coordinates well with the stove as well, color-wise.
Yeah, I was very happy with it. When we first started the job, though, they gave me the wrong measurements. So I was doing this whole layout on my floor, and I had a pretty good layout. I hadn't started making them, thank God. But totally,
thank God.
I had totally switched the layout because the cabinets went further than they thought. So measurements are always an issue.
Yeah. Well, and the process is so fluid that you make a change to an appliance or to a cabinet and it shifts, and then you need to make sure everybody's caught up to that. I mean, I've gotten lost in that a couple times where it's like, what do you mean we're not using this stove? Any tips or recommendations, things to avoid, best practices?
I would think that's one reason I like to see drawings or see the space.
Yep.
Depending on the space and how many small areas there are, like say underneath the window, in front of the sink, or whatever, a certain size and shape tile might look better than another. And kind of, it's proportions really important. And I don't like it when say there's one little tiny space left over, a whole tile, and then you're going to cut like a 1/4 of an inch off. I'd rather just make the tile that 1/4 of an inch bigger, because it'll just look better and cleaner. So whenever I can do that, I like to consider the whole space that way.
Well, and that's one of the benefits of made-to-order pieces, right?
Right.
You're able to fit the space better and more appropriately.
Right. And so with a repeated large pattern like the drawings, you can bevel the edges and fit them into the corner, so it's a repeat, which is really nice. In old times where you see very old tile, they really didn't use grout; they just butted them up together, and I love that look. It's it's kind of an old world look, and then you could just do a really really tiny grout line. But grout comes in different colors too. I have to admit, big grout lines look really bad.
They do, and And some of the colors that we've been experimenting with, actually, they draw too much attention to themselves.
Right.
So we've seen some really beautiful tile installations and then have gotten the grout color all wrong.
Yeah,
So,
totally. That can ruin the installation.
yeah, it's a lot to think about. And like I said earlier, if to do it properly, you want to give yourself time, because the last thing you want is to be rushed in some of these decisions, or at least that's how I feel.
Right.
But you don't necessarily, you want to meet a schedule that at the same time you're going to live with it for quite some time, unless you're Craig and you swap out your backsplash every 4 months.
That's what happens during the pandemic. You do things that you shouldn't be doing. Like getting a puppy, I did that too.
That's all right. So
I'm just going to show you some hand
ooh,
tiles. So
they're
that's
very different.
option. Like if somebody had something specifically they wanted to do, and this was kind of a Renaissance poppy, I guess.
Yeah.
And, here's one other one. So if somebody were to ask me to do something like that from a photograph or something that they had,
Those are great. The poppy in particular reminded me of the china cabinet we have here, which is painted in blazer by Farrow and Ball.
Oh, yeah.
So it would be a great way to incorporate some of the Farrow and Ball paint colors with a made to order tile piece. I've got all kinds of ideas going on now.
Definitely match to the Farrow and Ball. I just love it. You showed me that colored. I think it's called Eyeball.
It's called skimmed milk white.
Oh.
And the description of it is the white of the human eyeball.
Yeah, so it's
you did remember the eyeball correctly.
Well, I only remember the weird stuff. I read something recently that said the mind cannot ignore novelty, and it's so true. You'll probably be seeing these, but this was another of the images that I did, the series of the 7 deadly sins, and this is gluttony. And I was just sharing with Liz before that I did a tile job in Newport for the St. John's Episcopal Church in the point section. And a priest placed the order with Newport tile. And he wanted the 7 deadly sins to be installed around his bathtub, which I love. I never got to see it installed, but I did like the humor behind it. So the imagery that I use in my studio, a lot of it's public domain, and there's a great website if anybody wants to learn more about public domain artwork. It's called The Public Domain. There's lots of sites out there with public domain in there, but it has to be The Public Domain. And it's a British website, and what they do is they find public domain artwork anywhere in the world, these libraries, that things that you would never get to see, and they tell you the history about it, and they show you the imagery, they tell you about the artist, and you can always learn something from it. And they have they're odd, they're curious, they're humorous, really interesting artwork and pictures, and they're just coming out with a book on all their publications they've done. It's really great stuff.
For those who might be watching or participating who have not seen Craig's work in the drawing room, we also have a series of your ceramic dishes, which have the silkscreen patterns as well. I know customers have been really thrilled to find those here.
Oh, thank you, Anthony. That's so nice
Yeah.
to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, I know we had featured some of them in our previous presentation on women artists. So
Right.
we've got a lot of good response to those. I certainly have enjoyed working with you and learning more about your process.
Well, I so appreciate you having me do this. It's been fun. I did want to say, I know I sent a picture about the formula for if somebody wanted to get a rough idea about what costs might be. They need to measure height by width, like say along a counter, to get measured in inches, the height times the width.
there we go.
Yeah, there you go. You multiply that number in inches, so you get total inches. And in 1 square foot, there's 144 inches. So you divide that number by 144, and that will give you the square footage. So the example that I've written on that, just that one part of the wall is, let's see, 40 by 18. It was 720 square inches divided by 144 inches equals 5 square feet.
And then do you also add any kind of overage to your 5 square feet?
Yes, the showrooms I dealt with would recommend 10% because there's a lot of cutting, you know, possibly around that tends. I always thought that was a little bit high, but definitely you want to at least probably have 5 to 7% anyway.
Well, especially if you're laying everything out in drawing the way that you do, you can probably make the exact pieces that you need.
Right.
So it may not be that overage is
Right.
necessary. I mean,
Yeah.
unless you're working with a field tile that
right.
sort of goes out from the pattern. But
well, I always thought that the showrooms wanted to sell as much tile as they could. They were probably overage. So
could be. And then in terms of repairs, I would think that you might make a little extra just in case something weird happens.
Well, I always
you're certainly not going to be able to go out and buy a few extra field tile.
Right. I always make extra for anything I'm making, dishes, tiles, whatever, just in case. Yeah. I mean, it's an unexact science here.
most of life is, so it's okay.
You're right. That's true. That's where it gets interesting.
Yeah. Get comfortable being uncomfortable, right?
Right.
Can I ask one question?
Of course.
What's a field tile?
It's just the plain tile.
A plain tile. Okay. Just for the uninitiated.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you. I forget about that. So, I mean, square footage is, there is some lingo, I guess, to the tile. So square footage is what you would order by. Field tile, then there's bullnose is a rounded edge. If it's not going to go underneath a cabinet, you want it to look finished. So a bullnose would be an extra, rounding of the corner. And then there's, the frames, borders, things like that. But one thing somebody might really want to think about is when you do your countertop, a lot of people like to do a little lip of the same material the counter is at the wall, and then the tile comes down to that lip as opposed to going right down to the countertop. It can be done either way, but then the grout, if you go all the way to the counter, the grout is kind of sitting on the counter. And I feel like sometimes that can get loose. Whereas if it sits on like a piece of marble or corian or, whatever kind of material you choose, it's more finished and sturdy.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But of course, it's the look they want. So whatever. Way.
So if I'm getting started on a project, whether it's my kitchen or bathroom, I think we were also talking about, options for like tiling around mirrors and doing fun things. Is really my first step is just think up some ideas. Sky's the limit, be creative, and go visit Anthe, talk to Craig, and make some magic happen.
Yes, please. No, I'd love it if somebody comes up with something, really different and kind of crazy. I love working on anything like that. I have done mirrors before, bathrooms, kitchens, tabletops. So, anything you can tile.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you so much. This was fun.
And if you stay with us for a few short minutes, we'll have questions and answers.
Okay, great.
Take care, everyone.
Okay, bye.
And through the magic of the internet, I'm coming to you from a different location than you just saw. And Craig is here with me as well from her studio. Craig, hello.
Hi, Liz.
So thank you so much for taking us through your process. We really love seeing everything and all the different work that you've done. And I was actually, behind the scenes watching with my mom, and she has lots of questions. And the first question that she asked me was, say she's a project and she wants to do a few like custom tile insets, but it's going to use, commercial tile for the rest of the project. Do we worry about the thickness of the tile? How do you make sure that they look okay together and play nicely?
Right, that's a good question. If your mother had a sample tile, so most people would get a sample tile, usually for free from a showroom, or you check it out. And if I could see the tile, measure it, take pictures, look at the colors, then I could make sure that it was very close to the thickness of the tile. Commercial tiles tend to be thinner and more even, but I can, all I have to do is figure out the shrinkage for the particular clay body.
And is shrinkage after it's been basically baked, how much smaller it's going to get from the original? Yeah.
Right. So the clay body, when it's wet, has a lot of water in it. Once it dries, it shrinks to a certain point, and then once it's fired the first time, which is the higher temperature firing, it will shrink even more. And it can range from, I don't know, like 9% up to 12%. It can be a lot, or maybe not so much, but you just factor in for that.
It seems that there's a lot of math involved in.
It's simple, otherwise I couldn't do it.
And so, one thing I know we're also talking about the hatred of big grout lines. Are there other, tile trends or things out there that you recommend that people avoid?
Well, when you use commercial tile, installers will use spacers, and they're these little plastic or rubber things, so they get an exact line for the grout, which there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want a smaller line, I would think that you would have that conversation with the installer. But so with the handmade tiles, obviously they're going to be, there's going to be a lot of variation there. So,
sure.
But other than that, I mean, there's so many different kinds of tiles. One of the trends recently that I really liked were these encaustic tiles, and they're actually cement embedded, different colored cements, mainly for floor tiles, but they're absolutely beautiful and a really interesting finish. So another thing about ceramics, the finish can be matte, it can be gloss, obviously, or it can be in between there like a satin glaze. That can add an element of a difference depending on like your cabinets, if they're gloss or if they're matte. You might want to play off that some way.
No, that makes a lot of sense because, talking with Anthe about, paint colors as well, it's the same thing. She carries the Farrow paint line, and you can choose whether you're going from anything from matte to full gloss and so many variations in between. So it's interesting to know you can do the same thing when it comes to tile.
It really adds something. Sometimes I like to make, if I'm just doing a ceramic piece for the wall, I like to mix those different types of glazes. So there'll be a high gloss area next to a satin area, depending on what the piece is.
Yeah. And something that I think has really been, driven home through this presentation is that when you're doing some type of custom project like this, it's really nice when you're working with someone who knows what they're doing. So it's like, I can come to you with an idea and then you can tell me how you can help me bring it to life. Like you said, looking at the space and seeing how like the light might play. It's a little different than just, me just ripping something out of a magazine and saying, make this happen.
Right. Well, I definitely like to do the sampling in between for colors. You're never quite sure how the glaze and the clay is going to react. I mean, obviously you have a pretty good idea if you're doing the same thing. I definitely like to do a sample and have the customer take it home.
Sure.
And see if that's really what they want.
No, I love that. I had a visitor who was popping in the door, so I was like, hold on a second. We're doing a live stream. So anyone out there, if you have any questions that we weren't able to get to, please put them in the chat. And if you are internet shy, you can always reach out to us at the drawing room. You can send us an email at info@anthef.com. And, this video will be available on our website, on social media, so you can revisit it, and hopefully we can connect you with Craig if you're looking for your own custom tile project. So Craig, one of my favorite stories is the story about the 7 deadly sins, which you told, and it just, every time I think about it, it just it makes me cackle inside. Were you able to do other things with those tiles? Have you used them in other interesting ways?
Well, I use them in some sconces and other tile jobs, but there wasn't a story to go behind the other ones, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So I'm a big fan of your sconces, and I've been thinking about what I might like, because there's a space that I have that would be perfect for a Wanderlust ceramic sconce. And so when this came up, I was like, oh, do I want to set a sin sconce there? Maybe I do.
Well, thank you. Everybody has their favorite sin,
Absolutely. And then the other thing that that struck me was the poppy as well. Was that a hand painted tile, I think you said?
It was. Yeah, it is. Yes. Yeah.
And that one, I liked the brightness of the color in that, and I think that's one of the things that got our wheels turning about the different things you can do to play with paint.
That particular tile had extra firings. There's something called a China paint firing, which is a third firing after the first glaze firing. And you can add extra color and sharp detail because it's a very low fire. That's typically when you would put in a luster glaze or gold, any kind of metallic, which are not food safe, but they're a great decorative element. Yeah.
So our recommendations really for everyone who's thinking about, anything with custom tile is just come to us with your ideas, and Craig can make some magic happen. And I'd love to see some befores and afters when we get some custom installs.
Thank you, Liz.
Yeah, absolutely. So is there anything fun that you're working on right now that you can't wait to see the finished product?
Well, I'm always making more sconces. Right now, I'm having a little bit of a supply chain problem with my clay body because they're so busy trying to fill all the orders from the schools that have been shut down, which I totally understand. So I am just doing some sampling and working on drawings and making sconces until I can kind of get back to doing more production dinnerware. Sure.
And do you think it's going to set you far behind, or is it just a minor inconvenience at the moment?
Right. I don't think it'll be too much longer, although I don't dare call them again.
Yeah, no, fair. And I think that's really something interesting to think about, because there's so much happening in the world, and obviously part of the reason why we're doing a virtual chat instead of an in-person seminar. But there are so many things that have been impacted by supply chain issues and shipping issues, and to think it's affecting everything from deliveries of giant pieces of equipment down to clay for custom tiles.
Right. And I like to think the schools come first, because those kids have not had any fun things to do. Not being in school.
I think it's fair to say they can have it first. Well, Craig, again, thank you so much for your time. Everyone out there, thank you for tuning in, for joining us, for spending some time with us. And we hope you're inspired to think of beautiful ideas for your home or for a client's home. And we'll be in touch soon. You know where to find us. The drawing room is in downtown New Bedford, and that's my dad coming in to deliver Starbucks for me.
Hi,
Dad. Good man.
Thank you so much, Liz.
Absolutely. And so everyone, enjoy your day, and we'll be seeing you soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.